Hey everyone, Anton Korobov won the Sunway Sitges chess tournament 2019, so I thought it would be nice to check out one of his games. Here we've got Awonder Liang as white and Anton Korobov as black, played in round 9. So, e4 by Awonder Liang, c5, knight c3, d6, bishop b5 check, knight d7, and now a4. And the point of a4 is to control the b5 square so that black can't play a6 and b5, and that would be a pretty nice queenside expansion. So a4 is just to prevent that. We have knight on g to f6, f4, so some kind of Grand Prix Attack setup Awonder Liang is going for here. a6, bishop c4, e6, d3, bishop e7, knight f3, just normal development here by both sides. Castles, and now b6. So white has a pretty nice space advantage here in the center, but I quite like black's position because it's nice and compact. Like, if you look at these squares, look at these pawns, sorry, black doesn't have a whole lot of space. But these pawns control so many important squares along the 5th rank, and just in general, all the pieces are pretty reasonably placed. The bishop's coming out to b7, and it just seems like a tough position for white to breach. So, Awonder Liang tried queen to e1 here, principled move, typical for the Grand Prix Attack. Thinking about bringing that queen out to h4, where there will be some pressure on h7 and the king side in general, and also thinking about playing e5. We have bishop to b7, bishop to b3, rook c8, and now e5. And yep, as I said before, normal move can be played due to the fact the queen is supporting it, otherwise that pawn would be looking quite weak. And yeah, white's just gaining space, attacking black. The only drawback is it does open up the diagonal for this bishop on b7 and leaves f5 and d5, they're black's squares now. So the knight retreats to e8. We have bishop to d2. And now black looks at the position and he thinks, well, this knight on e8, not the best piece right now. So g6 is played, and now black can think about playing knight g7, which is a pretty good defensive square, and maybe even knight f5. Furthermore, this pawn on g6 helps prevent white from playing f5. But guess what? White plays it anyway. So, pawn lever, some kind of pawn sacrifice here by Awonder Liang, trying to open up the black king side. But it seems pretty scary, but against good defense, it doesn't seem to be quite working out for white. G takes f5 was played. This does open up this g file here against the black king, but if black were to play e takes f5 here, white would play e6. You should take that one off. And after queen takes e6, king g7, rook on f to e1. White's definitely got compensation for the pawn. In general, white took this pawn that was on e6, now the queen's there, and because that pawn's not on e6 anymore, especially the d5 square is nicely under control. And this could be a great square for a knight or something in the future. All of black's pieces are on the bottom 2 ranks here, and just in general, yeah, black's position feels a bit scary to play. So with that in mind, g takes f5 was played. We have e takes d6, knight takes d6, and knight e2. Now it's worth noting that bishop to h6 was a move here, not only threatening the rook on f8, but also queen g3 check, which would be completely devastating because of king h8, well, queen g7 is mate. So with that in mind, white is actually winning an exchange here. You'd have to get out the way with something like king h8, but after bishop takes f8, queen takes f8. This is one of these positions where you've got to be realistic. Okay, black is down an exchange, but please take a moment to look at this bishop on b7 and to look at its diagonal. Please take a moment to look at this bishop on e7 and how good it's going to be on f6. And the knight's also really good pieces participating with the central control black has. This bishop is pretty bad on b3 if nothing happens on e6. And just in general, you know, black's also got a pawn, so huge compensation, more than enough compensation for the exchange here. And I think at grandmaster level, or even lower than levels than that, it's all about, I think, having the courage to sacrifice an exchange and to know that it's all good for you. It's a really important skill to develop. So with that in mind, knight to e2 was played, not bishop to h6. Now Anton Korobov thought, well, which of the white pieces are going to participate in the attack here? Because if white's attack doesn't work, then black is just going to be up a pawn and win the endgame. And well, this knight is going to be going at black's king. It's definitely in the region. And with that in mind, bishop takes f3. You know, that bishop was a really nice piece, but it was worth it to just get rid of that knight on f3, because as I said, if black can trade down enough, he will just win that endgame. Rook takes f3, and now we can see knight to e5, exploiting the fact that that knight on f3 doesn't exist anymore. e5 is a nice square for the knight. The rook goes over to h3, and now c4. We have bishop to a2, c takes d3, c takes d3, and that is definitely a new weakness in the white position, that pawn on d3. And now it's just all or nothing for white. Positionally, he's completely lost if this kingside attack does not work. And it won't. Bishop to f6 is played. Black's king position has been consolidated, and he is really just up a pawn here. But still, Awonder Liang kept trying to get something on the king side. Bishop to c3, knight to g6, queen to d2, bishop to g5. You don't want to allow the queen to come to h6. Queen to d1, knight to e8. A nice defensive move, just controlling these two squares. You know, the bishop does seem pretty good on c3, and therefore that, you know, the knight just wants to make sure that those squares are under check or controlled. The knight comes to d4, knight to g7, and if you look, we've got three pieces here defending the king against one black white heavy piece attacking. So, you know, this attack's never really going to work. The bishops do eye down a bit, but it's not really enough. Knight to f3, bishop to f6, queen to d2, h5. I really like this move because now, well, it's just saying now if you play queen to h6, well, there's a pawn here, so the rook and the queen are not connected, and therefore, you know, white's got nothing. So after h5, rook to f1, rook to e8, bishop to c4, and now another trade. As I said before, the closer to the endgame, the better. B captures c3, and now b5, another nice move. Really trying to exploit these two weaknesses. It's all about looking for the weaknesses, everyone. And in general, black's probably just close to winning now. If this rook seems really poorly placed now that pawn's on h5, and black is already up a pawn. A takes b5, a takes b5, bishop to a2. If you take this pawn, queen comes out to b6 with check. This is a fork on the bishop and of course the king, so the knight would have to block the check and defend the bishop. But now rook on e to d8, and well, not only is black threatening e5 now, he didn't play that before because the rook was under attack from the bishop, but also rook takes d4, and if c takes, now we pick up the bishop. And white really doesn't have much here at all. You know, if you try something like king h1, well, rook takes d4 is going to win. So it seems the best try would be bishop to c4. The point being, after e5, queen a2, there is some pressure on f7 here. You could take the knight with the pawn, but I think cleanest would just be to get rid of that bishop, and after queen takes, pawn takes knight, and black is winning. These two knights are going to be far better than the rook. Black has two minor pieces for the rook here, and it's just winning. So, with that in mind, after a takes b5, Awonder Liang played bishop to a2, queen to a5, hitting that weakness on c3, bishop to b1. This seems to be a mistake. You know, white didn't have to lose the second pawn. You could try and defend with rook c1, but you know, in the long term, white is just going to lose. But that being said, bishop b1 doesn't help. Now black takes on c3. That is a second pawn, and now white just goes for one final attack. Queen to h6, and it's just not enough. Rook to c7, rook to g3, queen to f6, bringing in another defender here. d4, rook to c3, rook to g5, b4, knight to e5. Okay, white's got some pressure on g6 here. You cannot take this knight because you would lose your queen. But that being said, it doesn't even matter if white wins the pawn on g6. b3 is played, rook d1. If you take g6, well, f takes g6. Queen takes g6 is just going to trade queens, which obviously isn't good for white. So rook takes g6, but now you just play a check. King h1, and after king f7, white's got absolutely nothing here. So therefore, after b3, oops, sorry about that, b3, rook to d1 was played, but now just b2, and knight takes g6, f takes g6, rook takes g6, and now rook c1. Nice move by Anton Korobov. You know, it hangs the queen, but after rook takes f6, you play a check, take the rook off, and now say after rook takes b1, white's not got anything, and black is threatening. Rook, oops, sorry about that. Rook to f1 followed by a pawn promotion. So king g3 was tried, but now just rook to c1, and here I believe Awonder Liang resigned. Black is threatening to promote. You could try and threaten mate, but just rook to c7, like that, and mate is stopped, and the promotion cannot be stopped. So yeah, a nice defensive game by Anton Korobov. Yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.